Welcome to the Flagship podcast for another episode. Thank you for joining us today. I'm excited today to have the opportunity to have a good conversation with really a community pillar here in Madison County, here in Central Indiana. Please help me welcome Mr. Tom Bannon of Community Hospital Anderson. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks. Glad to be here, and really appreciate the opportunity. It's always nice to be able to talk about the community and just visit and have a conversation, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, I've heard a lot of great things. This is actually our first time meeting in person. I know we've exchanged some emails, so it's cool to put a face to the person now. But no, I've heard a lot of good things. I've heard you've held quite a few different roles within our community, and so we'll probably talk about a little bit about that. But just so people listening can get to know you a little bit, so I can get to know you a little bit, I really want to ask sort of a little bit about where you grew up, what brought you here to Madison County, to Anderson, and a little bit about your story and your journey thus far. So I'll leave that as open-ended as possible.
Yeah, no problem. So I am an Indiana boy and really a Madison County Pendleton boy to much extent. So my parents both grew up in Anderson. My dad was Jim Bannon, who was the executive editor and the assistant publisher of the Herald Bulletin. And if you're ever down by the Paramount, there's a bust of my dad outside there. There's when he passed away, the city dedicated a statue to him downtown there, and he was very, very involved in the community. He passed away unexpectedly 26 years ago, and he was 64. I was 32 at the time, and up until about 2 or 3 years ago, there wasn't a week that would pass without somebody saying something to me about him. So for over 20 years after his death, weekly, I would still have somebody say, "Hey, was Jim Bannon your dad?" Or "Your dad was Jim Bannon, and he did this." And
he had an impact.
And so, I really was raised with the spirit of community in me and whatnot. I was actually born in Kokomo. My dad, being in the newspaper business, was in different roles, and at that time worked for the Kokomo Tribune, who had a series of weekly newspapers, and my dad was the publisher of their weekly newspaper chain. And we lived in Greentown, which is near Kokomo. I have 3 older sisters. They all went to high school in Greentown. But when I was in middle school, the Tribune decided to get out of the weekly newspaper business. And Dad, being the publisher of the newspapers, saw an opportunity and said to Mom, "Let's buy 2 of these. And let's go back to Madison County." So Mom and Dad bought the Pendleton Times and the Fortville Tribune. And we moved to Pendleton when I was in 8th grade, and my grandparents were all here in Anderson. So I had been in Anderson a lot through the years. I think after about 48 seconds of being a small business owner, they realized they didn't like being small business owners.
It's not for the faint of heart.
It's not for the faint of heart. And they definitely had a faint of heart with this. And so they stuck with it for a year or two, but then kind of out of the blue, Bob Jackson, who was the kind of legendary longtime owner of the Anderson Bulletin, at that point, the Herald was the morning paper, the Bulletin was the afternoon paper. The Scotts owned the Herald, the Jacksons owned the Bulletin, and Bob called Dad. Dad had been a sports reporter and the sports editor for the newspaper in the 1950s, and said, "Hey, would you be interested in coming back as the editor?" And Dad said, "I couldn't come back quick enough." So he accepted that position. They sold the 2 local newspapers. And that's kind of my journey to Madison County. So I went to Pendleton Heights High School. After high school, I went to Indiana State University and graduated from there. And then I ended up out west for 4 years working in minor league baseball. And interned with the Pacers right out of college, and then worked in minor league baseball. And then
You said out west?
Out west. So I was in Reno, and I was in Riverside, California, and I was in Bakersfield, California.
I'm originally from Southern California.
Really?
Yeah, so San Diego primarily proper, but spent a lot of time. I went to school out in L.A. Near Riverside.
Yeah, I was
going
to say, certainly no others, Riverside in that area. So
absolutely.
And but I got to the point where I was just ready to move back. I tell people I was tired of being the voice on the phone being passed around on Mother's Day and Father's Day. Hey, you want to talk to your sister? That type of thing. And so I came back without a job, and just with the hope that I would, find something locally.
How old were you at the time?
I would have been 28 at that point. And so right at that point, Hoosier Park was being developed.
Okay.
Hoosier Park originally was licensed to a group out of Michigan that got the original license for it. They had some financial difficulties, and they sold the license to Churchill Downs, who, of course, is out of Louisville, Kentucky. And Churchill Downs was the first longtime owner of Hoosier Park, and I got on there at Hoosier Park. I was the third person hired at Hoosier Park.
Okay.
When I started, there was no building. It was just the floor. There were no walls or anything. And
just a vision.
Just a vision. So it was a big part of really getting involved in Anderson then as a young guy coming back at 28, and people knew Dad, of course, and Mom, and I had a lot of friends and connections still in Pendleton, but Hoosier Park was such a big part of kind of the revival of Anderson, that because it was just past the time when so many plants were closing and so many people were moving, and you could tell GM was going to be departing, and it was one of the first bolts of good news in a while.
Yeah, I mean, even now, even a handful of Flagship's employees, their first jobs were Hoosier Park.
Is that right? And it's interesting the number of interns I have around in the community now too from Hoosier Park.
It's a big staple for employment.
They
do a lot of good in that regard.
Yeah, they do. And so I was there for many years, and then kind of went around a little bit. From there I was at the Visitors Bureau as executive director of the Visitors Bureau when Ralph Day retired. And
how did that transition take place?
Well,
so Hoosier Park to the Visitors Bureau, I can see some overlap, but how did that door open?
So it slowly opened, a little slower than I wanted, to be honest with you. So when I was at Hoosier Park, I was ready for something different. It'd been about 13 years, and we'd gotten a lot of things done and open, and now we were getting ready to do the casino part of it. And it had been approved. We got legislation approved for that. Churchill Downs had sold it in the meantime. And I was ready for a new opportunity. And I also recognized that they needed different leadership for that. So, I didn't have casino leadership experience. And so, we had a great relationship. And I talked to the president at the time, Jeff Smith, Rick Moore, who was still there as the general manager. Great relationship with Rick, and I said, we probably see where this is headed. I don't have casino experience, and you're going to need that.
Yeah, you saw the writing on the wall, and you started looking for opportunities.
Right. I said, so let's just have a good amicable break, and we did, and it was very amicable. And they asked me to stick around another month, and they gave me a nice package, and everything was good. And then the Great Recession hit. And I was out of work at the wrong time.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I did some consulting stuff to kind of stay afloat.
Totally.
I ended up working at Reflectix in Markville for a while.
Reflectix.
And but then this opportunity came up,
cool.
and I was glad to get it and loved the job. It's a great job. It's similar to what you guys do out here in the respect that you are promoting. You are kind of like the marketing firm for Madison County in a lot of ways.
And we love it. It's become home for me and my wife.
Yeah,
it's a great place.
And so that's kind of how I looked at it out there. It's kind of how you guys look at it here. And that's a lot of fun.
It really is.
It is. And I was on the board at the Community Hospital Anderson Foundation, and I had been on some committees and certainly knew a lot of people there. Keith Trent, who is a close friend of mine, many people consider Mr. Community Hospital, he was the head of the foundation at that time. And Keith announced his retirement. And I knew he was retiring. He let me know. And I didn't think anything of it from a personal standpoint.
Yeah.
And then Chuck Staley, who, of course, very involved here at the Flagship.
Definitely know the name of Chuck Staley.
I was one of the chairs of a subcommittee for the Ivy Tech expansion.
Yeah.
And we would meet out at the Visitors Bureau, and Chuck was on that committee. And he came a little early one day, and he said, "Can we talk in your office?" And went into my office, and he shut the door, and he said, Keith's retiring. And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, we think you'd be a great fit for that job." I said, "Oh, Chuck, that's nice, but I love it here."
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, I think you'd love it there too. Give it some thought." Okay, so I went home. My wife is Jessica, and I said to Jessica, "Oh, this was nice today. They thought of me, and oh, that's nice." And then the next day, Beth Tharp, who is the president of Community Hospital, emailed me and said, "I want to talk to you too." And I said to Jessica, I said, "Okay, it's getting serious." So we talked, and I just saw it as a great opportunity, and I've been so blessed to have been there, and they have such an impact. So that was almost 9 years ago.
Okay.
I, in the meantime, had gotten my MBA from Anderson University.
Okay.
And I had always wanted a doctorate, but I wasn't sure in what,
Sure.
And
I'm in that boat right now.
Yeah, a lot of it was I liked the idea of the challenge, the educational challenge, and I wanted to complete, the ultimate, but I didn't know what in. And, in the meantime, I ended up at Community Hospital, and I was in community engagement, and I was much more focused on the health of the community than I had been. And opportunity arose. It was a doctorate in public health at Indiana University. So I am a doctor of public health. I completed that 2 years ago. And,
congratulations.
Thanks.
That's a trek.
It is a trek, but it's been a trek that is really meaningful because it dovetails so nicely with the position I'm in.
Yeah.
And it has opened more doors along those lines. So that's really kind of my journey here. It's kind of a long-winded answer for you, but
I appreciate the detail.
And and so now I focus a lot on public health and the general health of the community.
I have a few questions because one, that's an incredible story, but two things really stuck out to me. Now, in your journey, which is unique, but it's all I found it becoming more common, where people are making these transitions in mid to late career to something different.
Right.
I have a brother-in-law who just recently, he was in higher ed, he was a professor, taught for years, and was like, I think it's time for a change. And he's like mid-career, and making that mid-career change is challenging.
Yes.
So I would love to hear your insight, your perspective, because now it sounds like you did that sort of twice. You went from Hoosier Park to Visitors Bureau, then Visitors Bureau to Community Hospital.
Right.
And also, those are pretty eclectic changes.
They are. So I would say two things with that. One, I also have experience from the standpoint of being a spouse of somebody who did that.
Okay.
And we did it in very different ways. So I'll kind of touch on both of that.
Yeah.
So with Jessica, my wife is Jessica. She is a Anderson girl. She went to Highland High School. She was a very different career path, a very big change. So like she had been the marketing person and assistant director of the Paramount Theater.
Really? Okay.
And then Old National Bank, some of the local people approached her and said, we want to have somebody in banking that's really not been in banking and bring a fresh perspective.
Sure.
And so she went and did that, and that was a significant change. But then she made a really big change when she went to nursing school. So
that is a big change.
So that's a very big career change mid-career. And she, had already had her degrees. Now she's back in getting a full degree in nursing. And so she is an RN at Community Hospital, and she is our ortho neurosurgical coordinator. So that's a very big change. And
Absolutely,
I witnessed that. And the interesting thing with that was, having to go back to school, and being an undergrad, she was in with 18, 19, 20-year-olds, and she at that time was, early 30s, mid 30s, and just how much more difficult it was for her to kind of get back in that process of being a student and whatnot.
Well, if you don't mind me jumping in, that was sort of my second question, along with like that sort of mid to late career changes. My second one was going back to school at a later time as well. I sort of chunked my schooling together. I was like, I won't have a drive later to stay up late and do the papers. And so I tried to put a lot of my education together. But I know there are a lot of people, especially here in Madison County, that maybe started college, didn't finish it, or maybe got an undergrad and maybe is considering a master's. But that leap to like actually make that commitment of like, hey, I want to invest in myself in this way. It's a hard decision to make.
It is a hard decision to make. And, part of it too, Josh, so like with my career changes, to me, they're different organizations, but they're rooted in the same things that I was doing. So like I started out basically in public relations and marketing. Sure. And so I would say to people, I'm a PR person. I can be a PR person for whatever industry.
Yeah.
I'm just going to have to learn that industry.
You identified that skill of yours.
And that's something I will say to people that I know or want to have lunch or people that want to network. I'm always willing, if somebody just calls up and says, hey, I'd just like to get to meet you and ask you questions. Yeah. I'm always willing to go to lunch and do that. And so sometimes people will be so focused on their industry that they're not focused on their skills. Yeah. And I always remind them,
that's really good right there.
Look at your skills. What are you? And they'll say, well, I'm like, no, that's your industry. What are you? And they'll say, oh, well, I'm a marketing person or I'm a salesperson. I say, okay, well, that's what you are. Now you apply that to the new industry.
That's a great, everybody listening, like take that advice, because that is key right there. Too many people, their identity becomes their industry, becomes their job. And who we actually are brings far more to the table than just our job title of, I do X, Y, or Z. I can, like, previous to working for Flagship and running the incubator here, I worked in food service. I worked in the restaurant industry for years. And a door opened up, and I was able to identify those skills that translated to this, which was vastly different. So I very much understand what you're saying. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people miss being able to actually see the value that they bring as a person, and just marry it to the industry.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot, and it really narrows your focus too much sometimes, and you can't see exactly all the different pathways. You're only focused on that road you're currently on, and so I just think that's key. And with going back to school, you just need a great support system, and if you are the support system, you need to be a great support system to your spouse or to your child or your parent or whoever it may be. You need to really do that, and Jessica certainly was for me. I have two sons who are. My son graduated from Butler the same time I graduated from IU with the doctorate.
There we go.
The same 1 week apart, so we had a celebration together. But both of them were encouraging and supportive, and because it's a lot of late nights where you're like,
it is.
Spouse is going to bed, and you say, okay, I'm going to head into the desk for a little bit, and 3 hours later, you're walking into bed yourself.
I remember when me and my wife got married. I was right towards the end of my master's program, and it was like, we were newlyweds, but it was like, hey, I got to stay up and do homework.
I got to do this.
I got to do. I was one semester in, out, and I was just like, okay, I have one semester left, and then we can spend the late nights talking and all those fun things. And it's like, but right now it's homework.
And and I think part of it too is the mindset. And that is, I realized that when I went to Indiana State, when I went to college. Like when I left to go to college, I was graduating from college. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. I was going to graduate from college.
You decided.
Yeah, I was it wasn't that I was going to see what it was like or anything. And it's okay. College isn't for everybody. And sometimes you get there and you realize this isn't for me. Or things change, a parent passes away, or you lose a job, or financial difficulties. Things happen. But like for me, I was going to graduate when I was out here at AU with MBA. I say out here, I still think of AU so much a part of the Flagship. Yeah. When I was at AU with the MBA, I was going to get my MBA.
Absolutely.
And when I was going through the doctorate program, I realized I wouldn't say to people, I'm working on my doctorate. I'm trying to get my doctorate. I would say I'm getting my doctorate from IU.
That's a mindset, right?
It's
there.
a mindset. And I didn't even necessarily realize that until that point. And then I thought, you know what? That's what you need to apply for the rest of your life.
It's a real thing.
Yeah.
You just had mentioned this, and so I'll just share a little bit of my story, but I don't like to brag about this. It took me 8 years to get my undergrad done.
My wife's very similar.
It took 8 years, and it was because very much what you said. In my process, I started school, and my dad actually was ill, and it would be back and forth of me being his caregiver and me dropping out, taking care of him, then trying, he's stable, get back into school. Yeah. And I started in 2010, graduated in 2018 as well with an undergrad.
Yeah.
And then just recently got my master's, but it was awesome. It was that same thing. I told myself, no, I've spent too much time. I have this goal. I am going to get my degree, however long it takes. And that's also through community college, transferring, and all those different journeys. And so I definitely, I feel like I had that same thing where it was just like I was laser focused and said, no matter what happens, I'm walking across that stage with a degree at some point in my life.
Right. And that has probably been beneficial to you in other aspects of your life.
100%.
Yeah, and similar
because it was more than that paper.
Exactly.
It taught me something else.
Right.
Yeah.
And similar with Jessica. So she didn't have an issue with having to be a caregiver or anything, but different things came about and happened, and it caused just longer time period.
Totally.
And I always joke with her that she went to MU, multiple universities.
I'm going to take that one. That's good.
She was at AU, she was at Purdue, she was at IU, but
you do what you have to do.
You do what you have to do, and that's what she did. And it just, that helped her when then she was making that mid-career change into nursing, because she knew, I've already done this, I can do this now.
Sure. Well, we have about 8-10 minutes left, and so I want to respect your time in that. But you've shared a few different things. I guess I would like to ask, because there are a few questions left that I would like to get into. The first one would be so knowing that you've gone through this journey yourself, and your wife has gone through this journey of later in life choosing to pursue education again, later in life doing some career changes. What is maybe the piece of advice you might share with somebody listening, contemplating making that change, contemplating they're maybe in a job that isn't sustainable or isn't healthy for them, or whatever the situation may be, and they're like, I want to leave, but I'm scared to make that step, or I know I want to go get my degree or get a further graduate degree, but I'm afraid of X, Y, or Z. What would you encourage them with?
That's tough because every situation is different.
Sure.
It would be hard for me to say, just do it. You just got to do it. And
sure.
And then they're like, well,
just rub some dirt on it and move on.
How are we going to pay our mortgage? Yeah. And how are we going to do this? So realities are different for everyone. I would say don't be paralyzed by self-doubt. So certainly make sure that you have the wherewithal to be able to do it in terms of how your financial structure is, how your relationship is, and everything.
Being a good steward.
Right. Yeah. But if you feel like you've got that, don't let self-doubt keep you from doing it. And it was interesting when I worked at Reflectix. I mean, I worked on the floor. I was on the factory floor. I was making $9.50 an hour. I had gone from a 6-figure a year job to $9.50
That's a transition.
Because there was no work out there, and I needed work. And to me, that was a raise of $9.50. Because after doing consulting for a couple of years, and that started drying up,
something.
People were there was no hiring, and it was interesting because here I have a master's degree, and a lot of them. Some of them didn't even have a high school degree, and they would talk to me a lot and say, gosh, I wish I could go back and tell the 18-year-old me school's important, Do this, just get it done. And one of the things I say, if anybody young is listening, high school can be tough. We have 2 sons. Our oldest son, they're both very bright. Our oldest son just did not love school.
Yeah.
Our youngest son loved it. Ended up at Butler, graduated in 4 years, loved it. And I would always say, you've got to do what you don't want to do now so that you can do what you want to do for the rest of your life.
Amen.
And that's part of it too. So just don't be paralyzed by self-fear. Give it a try and see if you can do it. Yeah,
that's good. Accepting immediate discomfort for long-term gratification.
Yeah,
that's good. Last question I'll really leave us with is, as a pillar, as a leader in our community, you probably see a lot of things happening. You have a vision, a heart. Obviously, you've been in different roles. Looking to the future, looking at the next 3 to 5 years, like what are you hoping? What are you seeing? What are you casting a vision for in your home here?
Yeah, I think it's an exciting time here.
It is.
And I'll be 58 in a couple of weeks, and I told some people at work who are like in their early 40s, I said, this is a really exciting time for you guys, because as this happens, the next 10 years is going to be really significant. And there's going to be some growth, and there's going to be the foundation laid for really significant growth coming up. I'll be 68 at the end of that. I'll be retired by the end of that. I won't be the one on all the committees and the stuff.
Sure.
You guys will be. You will be, and that's exciting. You're going to really shape the future. To me, now's the time to invest in Anderson and Madison County.
Absolutely.
Because 10, 15 years down the road, which we'll get here much quicker than we realize.
Time flies.
We're going to be like, wow, the things are humming. No,
that's really good. And it's encouraging, because I think Anderson, Madison County has been in a down spiral, whether it's due to circumstances or even going back to mindset, even our own mindset as residents of this county for probably 20 plus years.
Yeah.
And I think I've only been here 3 years, but me and my wife, we just bought a building and we're opening up a business here in town.
Nice, good.
And I'm seeing more of that. I'm seeing more people seeing the potential, seeing the growth, seeing what you're saying, the 10 years out of like, hey, this is actually a great time to invest. This is a great time to help build a community back up to not even just where it used to be, but way further than where it ever has been. And so that's encouraging. And so there are a few encouragements for anybody listening. If you're thinking about a career change, if you're thinking about education, be calculated, be wise, be a good steward, but it might be time to invest in yourself. As Tom, you said, like, don't let self-doubt absorb you, but set the goal out in front of you and charge it head on. And then those who are part of this community, it's a great time to invest. And I'm not even talking financial. To invest in those relationships, invest in building a home here. I'm not saying buy a home. Maybe it is buying a home, but invest in building a community here. And so, Tom, thank you for your time. Is there anything else you would like to say to our audience or last minute tidbits?
No, the one thing I will say quickly is, one of the things that's been a belief of mine, and I've taken it with the Community Hospital Anderson Foundation, and that is, I really believe in the 3 I's. That's imagination, inspiration, and impact. Imagination is so important, and I always encourage people, wouldn't it be cool if, and then you fill in that blank, and that's your imagination, and that's usually what inspires you, and then that leads to the impact.
It gets us out of bed every morning. Yeah. It's not the day job that gets us out of bed, it's that dream.
Yeah, so think about that. Wouldn't it be cool if, it might even be a personal thing, wouldn't it be cool if I went back to school? Wouldn't it be cool if we did this with our kitchen? Whatever. That sets
whatever it is.
That sets the seed for you. But if you have something community-wide that you're thinking, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this or that? Share that. Share that vision. That will inspire others. That will lead to the impact.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Tom, for your time.
Thanks,
it was a pleasure.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, again, if you're looking at things happening in the community, I'm sure you'll see Tom around. A lot of things to look forward to here in Madison County. Thank you all for listening. Like, share, subscribe. We're looking for great voices that impact our community. And so if you've always been afraid to share your voice, share your voice. We need more people speaking out and looking towards the future and dreaming and imagining what can be. And so thank you all, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Flagship podcast, sponsored by Pinnacle Systems. Visit our YouTube channel for the full-length video podcast, or find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. New podcasts are posted every month, featuring local leaders from Central Indiana. For more content, follow us on social media at Flagship Enterprise Center. Until next time, thanks for listening.